You ever notice how we try to organize the news into these neat little insulated categories?
Oh, absolutely. Like putting a storm into the weather box and a congressional debate into politics.
Right. And, a new software update goes into the tech category,
Yeah.
makes the world feel manageable.
Yeah, manageable, but entirely artificial.
Exactly. But then you read a briefing like the one we're tearing into today, and that entire illusion just completely shatters.
Well, it shatters because those categories don't actually exist in the physical world. We are living in a system of incredibly tight coupling right now.
Right. Everything is connected.
Yeah. A disruption in one node doesn't just stay in that node anymore. I mean, it instantly cascades through the entire network.
Which brings us to today's deep dive. I am thrilled you're joining us because our mission today is to unpack a highly dense, incredibly timely 6 a.m. news brief.
Yeah, from the Daily Tech Reader.
Right, dated Friday, July 24, 2026. And the central theme of this brief is exactly that concept, absolute linkage.
It really requires looking at the global economy as a single exposed nervous system.
It does. We're going to explore how a localized military event on one side of the planet now moves almost instantaneously through global shipping lanes.
And rewrites the energy grid.
Right, spikes your mortgage rate, and even dictates the cost of the groceries sitting in your fridge. But before we start testing the reflexes of that nervous system, I want to set a quick baseline for you.
That's a good idea given the sources today.
Yeah, because today's source material deals with some heavily charged U.S. policies. We're going to be talking about military actions authorized by President Trump and a constitutional clash in Congress over war powers.
Plus some sweeping new international trade tariffs.
Exactly. So our goal today is strictly to read the dashboard for you. We are absolutely not taking sides, and we aren't endorsing any specific political playbook or military policy mentioned in the brief.
Right. The focus is purely on cause and effect, action and reaction.
Exactly that. We're just impartially mapping out the mechanics of how these decisions are rippling across the globe. And to help me trace that chain reaction without us getting totally lost in the weeds, I have our resident expert here to help synthesize all this.
Always happy to be here.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the physical spark for everything we are going to discuss starts with what feels like, well, a geopolitical powder keg.
It really does.
According to the brief, we are looking at the 13th consecutive day of U.S. strikes against Iranian targets. At the same time, Iran is actively attacking U.S.-linked positions in Jordan and Kuwait.
And we should note, this wider conflict is now grinding into its 5th month.
5 months, that's a long time for markets to hold their breath.
It is, and the duration is what changes the math for the global community. When a conflict hits the 5-month mark with daily strikes, well, markets stop treating it as a temporary flare-up.
They start pricing it in as a permanent structural risk.
Right.
And that structural risk is causing a massive fight in Washington. The House actually passed a resolution trying to restrict any further unauthorized U.S. military action against Iran.
But then the Senate rejected a comparable measure.
Right, so you have this intense constitutional clash over war powers, while the Pentagon is estimating the war has already cost roughly $37.5 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, and they are now requesting an $87.6 billion supplemental package, which awkwardly also rolls in agricultural aid and domestic infrastructure just to get it passed.
That political gridlock is fascinating, but the markets are entirely focused on the physical reality on the water.
The shipping lanes.
Right. The brief highlights that the president promised additional military punishment after attacks on 2 specific Saudi tankers in the Red Sea.
The Encilia and the Laila, right?
Yes. And the immediate retaliation for that promise was the Houthi movement, stepping up and claiming a total blockade on Saudi shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
Now, for those of you trying to picture the map, when you pair the Bab el-Mandeb Strait with the ongoing hazards near the Strait of Hormuz, on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula, you're looking at 2 major bottlenecks.
The 2 bottlenecks that ordinarily handle roughly 25% of the world's oil supply.
1/4 of the global supply is suddenly caught in a crossfire. That is wild.
Which led to a violent market reaction. Brent crude oil surged 7% on Thursday alone.
Easily pushing it above $100 a barrel.
Yeah, and for context, that is a nearly 40% gain in a single month.
Okay, I want to pause on that $100 barrel because this is a mechanical question that always bothers me.
Sure, good.
It feels like we're watching a game of geopolitical Jenga, where pulling one block in the Red Sea threatens to topple the whole global energy tower. But how exactly does a localized blockade instantly cost you and me at the pump even if the physical volume of oil hasn't actually dropped.
The oil still exists, right? What's fascinating here is how the shipping industry defines capacity. You're completely right. The actual molecules of oil in existence haven't decreased.
Okay.
But the market doesn't price oil based on what's in the ground. It prices it based on availability.
I see.
Because of the missile and drone threats, maritime insurers are looking at the Red Sea and either jacking up premiums to astronomical levels or refusing to underwrite the cargo entirely.
So the tankers literally cannot afford to take the shortcut through the Suez Canal.
They can't. They are forced to route all the way down and around the southern tip of Africa, past the Cape of Good Hope.
Which has to add, what, weeks to the journey?
It adds weeks, it burns exponentially more fuel just to move the fuel, and it requires more crew hours. But the real hidden cost, the mechanism driving that $100 barrel, is vessel availability.
Meaning they're tied up longer.
Exactly. If a tanker is spending an extra 3 weeks at sea, it is unavailable to return to port and pick up its next load.
So by forcing everyone to take the long way, you have effectively shrunk the entire world's shipping capacity overnight.
Exactly.
That makes so much sense. It's an illusion of scarcity created by logistics. And Saudi Arabia is caught in the middle, trying to protect its massive export economy without letting the regional conflict spiral.
And that logistical scarcity doesn't stay confined to the energy sector. That is where the linkage really accelerates, because an oil shock fundamentally becomes an interest rate shock.
Which the brief captures perfectly. The U.S. 30-year Treasury yield just hit a 19-year high, sitting at roughly 5.2%.
And the 10-year yield is at an 18-month high.
Right. Traders are now actively expecting 2 more Federal Reserve rate hikes by January. That is a massive macroeconomic squeeze.
But it's the Friday equation, as the briefing calls it. It's a very straightforward chain of causality.
Walk me through it.
Well, the expensive oil we just talked about raises the cost of manufacturing and transporting almost every good on Earth. That raises inflation. When inflation goes up, bond yields have to go up because investors demand a higher return to compensate for their money losing its purchasing power.
And when yields go up, the Federal Reserve has to step in and hike rates to cool down the economy.
Exactly. And the global markets are bleeding because of it.
Yeah, the Nasdaq fell over 2%. The S&P 500 dropped 1.24%. And over in Asia, it's even worse. South Korea's Keiko's PI dropped roughly 6%.
And Japan's Nikkei fell almost 3%. Plus, the U.S. dollar is incredibly strong against the yen right now, which just crushes Japan's ability to import that newly expensive oil.
But the brief points out that borrowing costs are only half of the macroeconomic squeeze.
Right. The other half is trade policy.
The new tariffs. The U.S. administration just rolled out new tariffs of 10% and 12.5% on 60 different trading partners.
Yeah. The stated reason is over alleged shortcomings in forced labor enforcement.
Right. They are invoking Section 301 authority for this, right?
They are, which allows the executive branch to enforce trade agreements or respond to unfair practices. But what is critical here is the scope. The previous temporary global tariff expired, so they replaced it with this targeted Section 301 action. But because it targets 60 major partners, it ends up touching 99.4% of U.S. imports.
99.4%. I mean, that is basically everything.
Basically, yes.
Now, they did carve out a few exemptions for oil, natural gas, and fertilizer, which obviously ties back to trying to mitigate that inflation we just talked about.
Right. They had to spare the energy sector.
But so what does this all mean for an average business owner? I mean, they're getting squeezed from both ends. They are paying more for freight because of the oil Jenga tower, and now they have to solve a massive new 10 to 12.5% tariff puzzle covering 99.4% of imports.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
It sounds like trying to rewrite your annual budget while riding a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You have to reconcile this new Section 301 schedule with your existing country-specific duties.
It is a compliant labyrinth, and it compresses corporate profit margins across the board.
Right? Someone has to pay for it.
Exactly. If a company can't pass those combined shipping and tariff costs onto the consumer, they just eat the loss. This brings us back to why the stock market, particularly the Nasdaq, took such a hit.
Because of the yields.
Yes. When long-term bond yields rise to 5.2%, it deeply hurts richly valued growth companies.
Because investors can get a guaranteed 5% return from the government without taking any risk at all.
Precisely. High yields reduce the present value of a company's theoretical future earnings.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When we talk about richly valued growth companies, we are basically talking about the tech sector.
Oh, absolutely.
Higher bond yields and soaring energy costs are crashing headfirst into the world's most expensive new obsession, which is artificial intelligence infrastructure.
AI is the ultimate paradox right now. It is the dominant growth engine for these companies, but it is also their greatest source of financial vulnerability.
Let's look at the earnings reports from the brief, because the scale of these numbers is almost difficult to comprehend.
They really are staggering.
Intel had a massive quarter, $16.13 billion in revenue, which is up 25%. Their data center and AI division drove over $6 billion of that.
And as a result, they are breaking their capital expenditure up to about $18 to $20 billion.
Right, but then you look at Alphabet.
Alphabet's numbers perfectly illustrate the tension here.
They pulled in $119.8 billion in revenue. Their cloud revenue was up 82% to $24.8 billion. Their AI model, Gemini, boasts 950 million users.
It's massive.
By all traditional metrics, it is a runaway success. And yet they recorded negative $5.9 billion in free cash flow due to AI infrastructure costs.
Negative $5.9 billion.
Yeah, and they are projecting capital spending of up to $205 billion by 2026.
And Tesla's in the exact same boat. They reported $28.24 billion in revenue, but negative $1.1 billion in free cash flow.
So they spent, what, almost $6 billion in a single quarter?
Yeah, $5.8 billion spent on CapEx for robotics, batteries, and autonomy.
We always think of tech as living in the cloud. But the cloud actually lives in massive buildings that need electricity.
You have to look at what that capital expenditure actually buys. They aren't just buying code.
Right.
Building AI infrastructure means acquiring real estate, securing specialized cooling systems, and fighting for a finite supply of advanced semiconductors.
So if oil and gas are expensive and AI infrastructure costs hundreds of billions, aren't these tech giants essentially becoming energy companies? I mean, expensive energy is now a tech sector constraint.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you've just identified the new test for the technology sector.
What do you mean?
Well, a few years ago, the only test was whether a company had the engineering talent to build a world-changing AI model. Today, the test is purely physical and financial.
Can they afford to plug it in?
Exactly. Can this AI system actually earn more cash than the astronomical capital required to power and operate it?
So how are they proving that financial value? Because I imagine enterprise buyers are getting tired of paying millions of dollars just to give their employees a slightly smarter chatbot.
They are, and that's why they are shifting entirely toward what the brief calls agentic workloads.
Meaning the AI actually takes action, rather than just generating text or answering questions.
Sure. Instead of asking a model to draft an email about a supply chain delay, you give an AI agent permission to cross-reference your inventory with that new Section 301 tariff schedule we mentioned.
Oh, wow.
And then it can identify the cheapest alternative supplier and actually execute the purchase order on its own.
But running a massive reasoning model for every tiny step of that process is too expensive.
Right.
And too slow.
Exactly. So companies are pairing one giant advanced reasoning model with smaller, highly specialized models that just handle the routine actions and data retrieval.
They want measurable productivity.
Yes.
And the brief highlights that this isn't just a corporate push. There is a new federal AI for Science program directing $5 billion across 15 different agencies.
They are deploying these models to tackle chronic disease, advanced materials, and energy technology.
Right. You can use AI to simulate millions of chemical combinations for drug discovery before you ever spend a dime in a physical laboratory.
Though the brief also notes a heavy caution from researchers. An AI can generate a brilliant hypothesis, but it still requires rigorous experimental validation by human scientists.
Human judgment is still required.
Exactly. The provenance of the data has to be perfectly documented.
Which is the perfect bridge to the final section of our deep dive today. We've zoomed way out. I mean, we've looked at naval conflicts, global bond yields, and $200 billion AI data centers.
It's a lot of macro-level stuff.
It is. But what I love about this briefing is how it brings all of these massive abstract forces crashing right back down to your daily reality.
Because eventually, macro volatility always becomes a local physical problem.
Let's look at the weather and health impacts, which the brief ties together brilliantly. Down in Texas and the Gulf Coast, communities are dealing with the remnants of Tropical Depression Bertha.
Right, which is causing heavy rain and localized flash flooding.
And the scientists are struggling with how to communicate the danger.
It's the challenge of probabilistic forecasting. Predicting the general path of a storm is relatively straightforward now. But forecasting the exact neighborhood that will receive 10 inches of rain in 2 hours? That is nearly impossible.
So meteorologists have to communicate a, say, 30% probability of severe flooding to a wide region,
The problem is human psychology. People hear 30% and they assume they are safe.
which makes it incredibly difficult for local governments to mandate evacuations or secure infrastructure. And while the South is dealing with water, the Midwest and Great Lakes are dealing with air quality.
Yeah, we have wildfire smoke blowing down from Canada and the West.
And this atmospheric transport is aggravating asthma and cardiovascular conditions hundreds of miles away from the actual flames.
And this is where the linkage of everything we've discussed today becomes undeniable.
How so?
When we talk about a geopolitical oil shock, it isn't just an economic annoyance at the gas pump, it becomes a literal health access problem.
Oh, because of travel.
Yes. When gasoline prices surge, patients in rural areas who have to travel long distances for specialized treatments like dialysis or chemotherapy, they start missing appointments.
Take that a step further with the shipping delays we discussed. Those tankers taking the long way around the Cape of Good Hope aren't just carrying plastic toys.
They are carrying temperature-sensitive medicines.
The brief points out that hospitals are actively having to review whether the shipping delays from the Red Sea, combined with the new 10% import tariffs, are going to cause localized shortages of generic drugs or disposable medical supplies.
It forces a complete reframing of how we view community resilience.
Because it's all connected.
Yes. The brief's most practical takeaway is that public health officials can no longer view these events in silos. You have to treat transportation logistics, air quality, heat, and supply stability as connected parts of community health.
If the cargo ships stop moving, the local pharmacy eventually runs out of stock. It is genuinely wild to sit back and think that a drone attack in the Red Sea could eventually dictate whether a pharmacy in the Midwest gets a shipment of refrigerated medicine on time.
All while the community deals with wildfire smoke and floods from Bertha.
Right. So how does the everyday person or an employee trying to prove their worth against AI actually adapt to this level of interconnected chaos?
The brief offers some incredibly sharp career advice on that front.
What do they say?
Well, as cyber teams are now managing permissions for these AI software agents acting on employees' behalf, pure production is no longer enough.
Like just generating code or drafting summaries.
Exactly. That is no longer a moat for your career. The most secure, resilient jobs moving forward are the ones anchored to a real physical constraint.
Anchored to a physical constraint. Like what specific?
Physical safety, regulatory compliance, physical infrastructure, or accountable decision-making. You need to combine deep domain knowledge with strict data verification.
Because the AI can't verify itself in the real world.
Right. The AI can draft the complicated purchase order or suggest the new chemical compound, but a human must authorize its deployment and take legal responsibility for its accuracy.
The brief's exact phrasing is brilliant. You must retain evidence of your judgment-intensive contributions.
Retain evidence of your judgment, because judgment is the one thing the models can't simulate. They can calculate, but they cannot take accountability.
Wow. Well, we have covered an incredible amount of territory today. We traced the linkage from the physical spark of a $100 barrel of oil in constitutional war debates straight into the macroeconomic squeeze of 19-year high Treasury yields and massive new Section 301 trade tariffs.
That's a massive web.
It is. We saw how those high yields and expensive energy costs are forcing a reality check on Alphabet's $200 billion AI infrastructure plans. And finally, we brought it all home to see how probabilistic weather forecasts, wildfire smoke, and delayed cargo ships merge to impact local health.
And the future of human judgment in the workplace. The web is vibrating, and we are all sitting on it.
We absolutely are. Now, before we sign off, I know you always like to leave us with one final thought to mull over. Something that builds on the sources, but pushes the conversation forward.
I do. And this raises an important question based on everything we've unpacked today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We noted that expensive, continuous, massive power is now the single greatest bottleneck for the AI revolution.
Right.
Data centers cannot rely on intermittent energy. They require firm, constant gigawatts of electricity to function.
So what does that mean for the future?
Well, given how critical these AI models are becoming to national security, supply chain management, and global economic dominance, will future nations and tech monopolies eventually be forced to treat their domestic data centers and local power grids with the exact same aggressive military and strategic importance that they historically applied to foreign oil reserves and the Strait of Hormuz?
Wait, really? We've spent decades deploying aircraft carriers to protect the flow of oil. You're suggesting we might eventually see that same level of militarized protection for server farms and electrical substations in our own backyards.
The constraints of the physical world always assert themselves, even on the cloud.
That is a fascinating and, well, slightly terrifying thought to end on. Well, that is all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us as we mapped out this chaotic, interconnected system.
Thanks for having me.
It is a stark reminder that there are no isolated boxes anymore. A pulled thread in the Red Sea really does unravel the economics of your own hometown. Keep asking questions, keep looking for those hidden connections, and we will see you next time.